Horticulture. So this is the agenda. I'll cover strategy, committee election, finances, annual report, 25 years celebrations and farewell. And Damien, our manager, will cover the management update, the management team, the certification metrics, update on key projects and other business. And if anyone wants to add anything to that agenda, if you could just enter it into the chat, please. So with regard to strategy, we had two major strategy sessions, one in 2017 and one in 2022. So this is our latest strategy. So I think the vision and purpose statement I'll read is to enable the production and supply of safe and sustainable food is our vision. And the purpose is providing simplified, cost-effective and integrated assurance in New Zealand horticulture that is trusted and valued. And our values are safety, sustainability, trust and relevance. Regarding NZGAP structure, the owner of the entity is Horticulture New Zealand, and the committee sits aside from that and is supported not only by NZGAP but by its members, being the product groups and affiliate groups. So NZGAP staff report through the Horticulture Chief Executive, and Horticulture provides many of the services for NZGAP. And down below you can see the structure underneath the NZGAP manager, having a technical advisors, operations advisors, data and systems analysis, and certification administrators. So now we've got a full complement of staff, which is a long way different to what it was a few years ago. Any questions on that, please just enter it into the chat. Regarding committee elections, this year Kate, Alan and Kath were at the end of their terms. Kath did not restand, and so special thanks to Kath for her contributions over the past 3 years. So we've had 3 grower positions available and 1 non-grower position available. And nominations were sought from NZGAP members, product groups and district associations to fill those vacancies. And so congratulations to the successful candidates there, and there were the same number of candidates as vacancies, so there was no elections required. So congratulations to Kate, Alan, Linda and Carrot. So the term for these re-elected or elected positions is for another 3-year term. The other committee members is Matthew Bannister, who's been on the committee for some time, and Adam Jory, both have contributed significantly to the committee over their period on the committee. And a special thank you to Mark Casey. Mark has filled the independent position from Foodstuffs Group. He's just finished his 3-year term and is stepping down at this annual meeting. So a special thank you to Mark. You've contributed very well to the committee over the period of your tenure. So thank you very much and all the best for your future going forward. So I currently am the appointed position from Horticulture, and I've been in this role since 2016. But as I'm no longer a director of Horticulture New Zealand, my term is up. So this is my last official function. I'll be carrying on in an advisory capacity for another meeting. And then Bernadine has joined the committee, and there will be an election for the chair in the meetings to come. So welcome, Bernadine. She's currently Vice President of Horticulture New Zealand Board. So yeah, welcome aboard, Bernadine. I'm sure you'll make a great contribution. With regards to finance, I'm not going to read out these numbers, but you can see that our income has gone up somewhat in the last year from the previous year, but our expenditure has increased as well, and probably increased more in proportion. So the big areas that have increased there is our audit expenses that we don't have a lot of control over, passed on from our providers. And our staff costs as well, given that we now have a full complement of staff, that staff cost has increased considerably, but shouldn't grow much from the future years. So that's resulted in a net surplus of 21,000 as opposed to 129,000 from the year before. But on top of that, we have project expenses of 42,000 and NZGAP contribution to the National Technical Working Group of 15,000. So a total deficit of 35,000 compared to a 45,000 surplus last year. So that $35,881 has resulted in our reserves dropping from 601,000 to 565,000. Once again, if there's any questions on that, please enter it into the chat. So the budget for the 2023-24 period is highlighted there in the round numbers. So we're looking at a budgeted increase from this year up to just 1.559 million. With expenses of 1.417 million. So that would result in a net surplus of 141,000, and then we take projects into consideration. We should have income of 122 and expenses of 289,000, resulting in overall surplus of 25,000. So the significant changes there going forward is the small increased uptake of newer programs like social practice, contractor standard, and the EMS, and significant increase in overhead costs, significant increase in the audit fees, including travel, which I've already mentioned, and an increase in fees to cover those increased costs. Projects like the support for version 7 development and Growing Changes project. Kate McDermott's been employed to help with that. And the Sustainable Farming Fund for GFSI recognition project. So hopefully that will that's the impact of the 122,000 of income. That's where that is hopefully going to be derived from, and an income also from Growing Changes to support the development and delivery. Once again, any questions on that, please enter in the chat. So our annual activity report for the period 31st of March 23 can be uploaded or downloaded from the website, and the link is there. And printed copies can also be requested by emailing info@nzgap.co.nz. And it will be shared also on the HortNZ newsletter this week. So it's quite a milestone that we've reached in 2024. Will be the 25 years of NZGAP coming into existence, originally known as the Veg Fed Quality Assurance Program, and it was established by the New Zealand vegetable growers, vegetable and potato growers federation originally, and they were the main instigators to get this program off the ground. So special thanks to the movers and shakers that had that vision right all the way back then, that created this program that is very significant for growers now. So the first certificate post-trials were issued in September 1999, and the events and communications will be planned through 24. We plan to have a stakeholder event in March and an event at the Horticulture Conference to celebrate this 25 years. So as part of that, we'd appreciate any stories from stakeholders on the formation of NZGAP and any major milestones over those 25 years that you'd like to share with us. So please send that to info@nzgap.co.nz or call one of the team, please. So this is my last slide. I'm retiring from the committee after 6.5 years, and it's been a enjoyable and rewarding time on the committee. And I especially like to thank both past and present members on the committee, John, Adam, Matthew, Kate, Alan, Kath, and Mark, for everything you've done this year and in previous years. A special thanks to Damien and the management team for their hard work through this year and the years that have been. I think the organisation is in great stead now. When I first came, I think we had I think 2 staff members in total. Now we're up to 5 or 6, and it's just a whole different dynamic and providing a lot better value than what we could in those earlier years. So I just wanted to offer some personal reflections as well. And interestingly, when Julian Rain was the president of Horticulture New Zealand, he put my name forward to go on to this committee, and I'd have to say that probably assurance and auditing probably wasn't my favorite job. I think if I had a choice between sitting on a tractor or doing an audit, it would be sitting on the tractor. So coming from that background, I also knew the value of audits and the importance of them, particularly for our markets and our consumers, and not to be underestimated. So I knew the value of it. I probably just didn't enjoy it that much. So I think that gave me some insights into what we need to do as an organisation as well, in terms of we need to really make sure that we're providing really good solutions for growers. And I think we've done that with especially things like the Food Act, EMS and social practice. I think the organisation has really helped provide solutions. And I think also it's very important that we have clear, defined pathways for growers. So there's as much simplicity as we can possibly get into the audit process. And I think we've hopefully achieved that. There's still a lot of challenges that are coming to us from government over the last 6.5 years. Those challenges, especially around the environmental area, has been immense, and I think we've been up to the task. But I think also it's really important that we become cost effective as well, and have that. The ultimate aim is to have one auditor up the driveway. So I think that's probably my reflections over the last 6.5 years, that we've come a long way, and I'm starting to lose my voice, so it's probably good that I finished talking. So I'd just I'd like to hand over to Damien now to handle his part of the report.
Thank you, Tony. Before I start, just want to thank Tony for everything he's done over those 6.5 years. Certainly brought some more structure and professionalism to the NZGAP systems, our governance, and also that strategic direction. As Tony mentioned earlier, that strategic review in 2017 was very significant, after a new terms of reference for the NZGAP committee and a brand new committee that was very much committed towards a new new horizons for NZGAP and new vision. And over the 5 years, a lot has changed. A lot of things have come at NZGAP from external forces, whether it's from the market or from the regulators. So it was timely that we did that another strategic review last year. And Tony was very good at keeping everyone on point. The role of governance versus management, and all of our stakeholders in developing that strategy. And I think it has set NZGAP up for success in the future. So thanks, Tony, for everything you've done in that. It's a structures for NZGAP in terms of the governance and leadership of the scheme, and establishing that strategy, which has been a great guiding light for us over the years and has set us up for success. Thank you. So I'm going to give a quick update on the team, bit of an overview of the current year around certification metrics, and then what people are most interested in is our projects. There's an awful lot going on, so we're trying to deliver on developing NZGAP systems so that we can meet all these new requirements in a cost-effective and simplified way for growers as possible. So here's our current team. People that might not know from our more recent addition would be Kate McDermott. Joined us from Zespri in April this year. Great to have Kate on board. She's primarily leading the version 7 development, so our rules and our checklists. A lot of work with grow groups as well, bringing that experience from Zespri to NZGAP, which is invaluable, and it's also helping in the grow and change project. So technical advice for our extension officers there, the advisors, auditors, and helping to support development of the EMS for freshwater farm plants. So everyone else has their areas around operations or administration, and we're putting a lot of emphasis on our systems to try and come up with systems-based solutions. And so that link between the technical side around the rules and checklists and our IT system, which very much facilitates the implementation and operations, is a big area that we're working in. So very, very thankful for the team and how we're working together to deliver on those solutions for growers. Another thanks for the team, I suppose, for covering for me while I was away. I had a extended leave this year to go home to Ireland to get married, to traveling, and they did an incredible job. So I'm very, very thankful for that. Doesn't mean I'm going to go on holidays again, although it is great to know that things are well looked after even when I wasn't here. Looking at our certification numbers, so we've probably plateaued a little bit in some areas with NZGAP certification. I think some of the drivers for that being the barriers to entry with the costs of certification, and then we're seeing consolidation in some sectors, like especially in vegetables. If you look at total numbers there, the Food Act add-on is probably the one that gives a better indication of our total numbers, so around 1,600 growers in NZGAP across the NZGAP standard, Global Gap equivalent, or Global Gap certified growers that are using NZGAP as a pathway for the Food Act. And the other areas where we're seeing growth would be in the environment management system, a small increase in number of growers, but very significant in terms of the area. So we've got a lot of the large producers already in the EMS, and over the last year they've moved to that certification step. So we've just put in registrations here, but we have seen big progress from last year in terms of at that earlier stages all the way through to certification stages now. And likewise for social practice, a lot of audits have been done in the last year and in this calendar year as well. So the targets set by retailers in that space around social practice, certainly seeing lots of progress from growers getting certified. Other programs then are contractor certifications slowly increasing, but we have again seen increase in registrations, which for new programs it always takes time for people to onboard, and we are seeing barriers there as well in terms of costs, but looking at ways to minimize that compliance burden while also providing a really comprehensive solution that meets the market's needs and stakeholders' needs, thinking the likes of the regulators especially. NZGAP is not just about growing or contractors. We also have supply chain certifications, so if a number of packhouses, transporters, wholesalers, I'd say our biggest increase there has been in wholesalers, about 10% increase in the last year. I'll just give a quick overview of the projects that we've got underway at the moment, or some of the key projects at least. So version 7, our Global Food Safety Initiative recognition, freshwater farm plans, Grow and Change project, and our information technology development. So in terms of version 7, what we're looking at, the outputs from it would be 3 separate programs, which would be very well aligned. So we're taking what are currently two very separate programs, and pulling everything together into one set of rules and one checklist, and then essentially filtering that, outputting it into 3 separate programs again, because they need to be separated from a grower's perspective and from a regulator's perspective, from the market's perspective primarily. So what we're doing is essentially aligning everything, integrating everything, and then we do what would be considered a filter and export to have 3 separate programs. So the current NZGAP standard is going to be pulled back slightly to be called an NZGAP local standard, so it won't really be suitable for export anymore. And the emphasis there is to try and simplify things for those smaller local market operators. Our NZGAP Global Gap equivalent, very similar to what it is now in terms of Global Gap recognized, but it will be more aligned with our local standard than it might be right now. And then our NZGAP GFSI is a standard that's very much based on our local standards. It'll be the same food safety questions across all of these programs, but it's going to be separated so that it can go through a recognition process with Global Food Safety Initiative, GFSI. It's primarily asked for in the Australian markets and in the North American markets. So essentially what we're going for is consistent food safety standards, consistent processes across all of these programs, which is I'd say Global Gap equivalent and the NZGAP standard are quite different at the moment in terms of how they're administered. So we're looking at consistency across all programs, consistency on the rules, consistency on the standards. So from a grower's perspective, if they have to move from NZGAP local to GFSI, for example, it's not going to be something brand new. It's just going to be slight differences in between those. To step up to the Global Gap equivalent standard, and there are a lot of additional questions around sustainability, especially. However, if a grower has started with the NZGAP local with the EMS add-on, then Global Gap equivalent would not be considered a massive step up in terms of what they need to do on farm. So just a bit of a progress update on where we're at now. We've drafted the rules on the checklist, and we are looking at the impact on, what I mentioned there already around the changing, getting more consistency between the different programs. That means that we have to review our current internal systems and then how we integrate with other systems, whether that's MPI under the Food Act or our audit bodies. We're at this time now, we're starting to organize the pilot audits, and that's to test the new checklist primarily and get some feedback from auditors and growers. And once we have a final draft, we will look at stakeholder consultation in the new year. And then ultimately the aim is to get the Global Gap equivalent program off to Global Gap for benchmarking and that review process, which takes a number of months. If we can get that by done in Q1, then that will help us meet our timelines for the year. Likewise with MPI, that's numerous months to get through the Food Act valuation process. So because this is a significant change to our standards, we have to go through that process with MPI under the Food Act. The main message from here for today for growers is that we're looking at these standards, all 3 will be available for growers to become certified from Q3 2024. What this means for anyone who's in Global Gap equivalent then is once we have finalized and had recognition from Global Gap, well then growers will be able to get audited against the new version 7 Global Gap equivalent. So that will be hopefully from June 2024, depending on process with Global Gap, which is potentially elongated, but we are hoping that it will be a quick turnaround. And then in order to meet global gap timelines, that standard becomes mandatory from 1 Jan 2025. So the sooner that we can get growers onto the new standard and before the new season starts, especially the global gap audit season usually commences around November time, then so getting the welcome packs in, getting everyone's systems in place to be ready for the audit season is the ultimate aim. So what that means for the current version is that it is a bit, you can be audited against that version anytime in 2024. But then once it comes to 1 Jan 2025, you'll not be able to be audited against the old version. So the message to say global gap equivalent growers would be to keep an eye out, especially for mid next year. And then when it comes to late 2024, you will have a choice to either pull your audit forward to get it done sooner on the new version. Is probably the most optimal approach for growers. Any questions on version 7? So there's a lot to take in, but hopefully the main message of having a new version available for the second half of 2024 is the main message for everyone here. Global Food Safety Initiative project. We've had to have a change of tact since this time last year, mainly because we've run into a number of issues with GFSI. The recognition process is quite problematic, and the requirements that have to be met are unworkable in some ways, in many ways actually, and the timelines are difficult as well to work to. So without getting into detail, it's just it's a bit of a difficult process, and other schemes around the world are in the same situation. So Global Gap, Fresh Care in Australia having very similar challenges, and BRC as well. So our change of approach has been that we will have that new option. So we call that NZGAP GFSI or NZGAP export. So it will be launched at the same time. Be very, very similar to the other standards. And there are some additional requirements around GFSI, things like unannounced audits. So that will only apply to that program rather than across all of them. And that will be launched in the middle of 2024. It's aimed at growers that need to meet overseas market requirements. Use Australia and North America as the two primary markets where GFSI is needed. And meanwhile, we're also advocating for more workable requirements and recognition timelines. So at the moment, it is essentially a 3-year process from when you decide you want to develop a new program and then to have GFSI recognition for that. And that makes it very difficult to get on a continuous improvement journey. If any changes are made to the standard or to GFSI requirements, then you're resetting that 3-year process, which is quite problematic. And we want to improve that because it's essentially reducing the ability for the likes of NZGAP schemes and the ability for growers to access markets that are asking for GFSI recognition. So yeah, it's a major focus of ours as well. Any questions on GFSI? Oh, good. Quiet crowd today. Freshwater farm plans. A lot of people's agendas, very mystical area and an awful lot going on. But I think NZGAP is very well placed, especially with the Environment Management System add-on. And we had a win earlier this year where the National Built Environment Act, formerly the RMA, has been reviewed, and they've put in this clause which says that the Regional Council may approve an industry organisation to provide certification or audit services. And we are liaising with MFE on what that means. And there's a section called the Minister's Standard that will establish some criteria for a scheme that an industry organisation like NZGAP would have to meet. I'm hoping to hear more on that within the next few weeks. And essentially that will enable a formal recognition pathway for the EMS add-on. And we have that in Canterbury and in places like Gisborne. And even though it meets the requirements, exceeds the requirements, without that official recognition pathway, it's difficult to demonstrate or to claim that recognition has been achieved. So we're in a situation at the moment where freshwater farm plans are being rolled out. So we cannot wait any longer we can't necessarily wait for that recognition pathway to be established and for NZGAP to be developed in order to meet the new requirements, if there are any. So what we're proposing is an interim approach, which is essentially a hybrid, where the EMS and freshwater farm plans can be rolled out together in order to minimize the burden on growers. It's absolutely suboptimal. We've been working on advocating for recognition. Hort NZ has been doing incredible work in this space for a number of years, and as have all of our industry stakeholders, with a very consistent message about we want recognition of GAP. Unfortunately, it's come at a time when after the regulations have already been developed and implemented. However, the interim approach will still be a benefit to growers, and what we're proposing is that we align the EMS content with freshwater farm plan content, and that's not a major job there. The next step is very much
Damien, if you just get a wee bit closer to the screen, sometimes your voice is going in and out.
Interesting. I'll try something. I'll try and stay steady. Okay. So developing our workflows and our IT systems primarily in order to deliver on this hybrid approach. So it's essentially another program that's been delivered in parallel with the EMS. So we want to make sure that that is operationally makes sense for everyone that's involved in the process, and that enables the next things to happen. So we're looking at aligning what's called the certification step under freshwater farm plans with the EMS audit step under EMS. Similarly, the freshwater farm plan audit steps, it's an easier alignment there with the EMS audit step. And then future freshwater farm plan recertification step, also aligning with an EMS audit step. This is an interim solution. We think it will work. It is going to be a little bit complicated, however, still benefit to growers, because we don't want to be working in completely separate systems, and with the aim that the EMS is recognized, is formally recognized. Well, then moving from this hybrid approach to the full recognition approach should be more straightforward for growers as well. Any questions on freshwater farm plans? Sound okay now, Tony?
Yeah, no, good. Yep.
So just use an example here from Waikato, where they've given a quick overview of the process in order to get a certified freshwater farm plan. I think the steps that we're aligning with most would be developing through the industry program. So that would be essentially starting with the EMS as your base system for your freshwater farm plan. And then we have our own development processes there, which I think would be well aligned with the freshwater farm plan process. And then that final step in terms of the audit and certification. So that hopefully is a supportive function for growers, and that demystifying a lot of this stuff. If you can develop your freshwater farm plan using the EMS as the base, and then submit it to a person who can do the certification step for the council and can do the audit step for NZGAP under the EMS, well, then that's an optimum solution where one person is undertaking two roles. Moving on to Grow and Change. So I'm not going to speak too much on behalf of Grow and Change on this, but really want to demonstrate the linkages between what NZGAP is doing and what Grow and Change is doing. So it's a Hort NZ funded project, which is jointly funded by the Ministry for Environment. 3-year project run through till 2025. And what they're doing is basically supporting growers to, there's two main functions there, but one is about adopting good agricultural practices through freshwater farm plans. So it's getting growers on the journey to develop a plan and get ready for audit, ultimately get certified and demonstrate that there's progress happening in the hort sector around freshwater. And then separately is also developing, or in parallel, is developing the training and professional development program for auditors, advisors, and growers. Give an overview of the roles that NZGAP is playing in Grow and Change, because it's very much a partnership approach between Hort NZ and NZGAP. So we're supporting by with technical input into the review of the environmental guidelines. Reasons for that is to make them very easy to be adopted by the EMS, and also feedback loops in terms of what we've heard from growers on those existing guidelines. So trying to make them as user friendly for growers as possible, and that they can be adopted by the EMS and most readily, easily, I suppose, is what we're trying to aim for there. Doing a bit of upskilling for auditors, advisors on the GAP system in general, on the EMS itself, and on freshwater farm plans, that hybrid approach. So rather than technical around nutrient management or anything like that, it's more about what is the certification process and what are the things people need to consider in order to adopt the program, apply for it, and get ready for audit. We're doing our usual administration there, in processing applications and passing them on to the auditors for scheduling audits and certifying growers. And we do provide a support function there as well for mapping, given there's so many options out there and there's very particular needs under freshwater farm plans and farm environment plans. So if we can help growers get their property boundary, add their GIS layers, and that's a really good basis for their freshwater farm plan. Where we're at now is starting to develop our projects around the next phases of the Grow and Change project. So one is optimizing our internal systems and processes. There are additional steps that Grow and Change is putting growers through for those catchment projects. So if we put everything into one workflow, then that is going to help minimize the administration and help support progress reporting from a HortNZ perspective, from the sector perspective, and just think minimizing the confusion between auditors, growers, NZGAP on Grow and Change on where a grower is at in the process. What I just mentioned already around freshwater farm plans, we want to review the EMS to meet that freshwater farm plan requirements for the hybrid interim approach. And we are also looking at adopting tools and technologies that will help step growers through the process, whether that's developing their plan, developing their maps. And one of the platforms we're looking at is very well aligned with what is needed for freshwater farm plans and the administrative burden in terms of submitting things to the council. So if we can adopt, we're piloting those tools at the moment and rolling those out to all growers. So again, hopefully demystify the process to becoming certified, and help growers develop their systems and their maps in a very in a more structured way and a bite-sized amounts so that's, say, just a little bit less complicated overall. Any other comments on Grow and Change? Good. Okay, and then lastly, just a bit of an update on information technology. So we've been doing some major upgrades of NZGAP systems internally, and that is really to cater for the complexity that growers are, that we're facing as NZGAP. So because of pulling everything into one integrated solution, it means that NZGAP systems have to be able to talk to multiple other systems. You can see the list of programs that we've got. That adds complexity as well when a grower's got more than one program that they're certified to. So essentially, we're upgrading our systems that will cater for that modular approach more readily, and we'll be able to adopt version 7 when it comes in, and say much more readily as well. So from a user perspective, there's increased functionality. From an NZGAP and auditor perspective, we're trying to reduce that administration and data entry. From a grower's perspective, equally reducing that admin burden, because we will have better clarity on the current information that we'll be able to present to a grower to say, here's your current information, all looks good, they don't have to re-enter it. We are looking at better reporting, and that is one of the key things been progress reporting. And so we've got reporting on our more operational level, then also taking a step back and saying where are we at as a sector, and making progress on key issues is a really key thing for our stakeholders. And we want to improve our system integrations. We have done quite a lot in the Food Act space, and doing more and more in the auditing space. We've already mentioned freshwater farm plans and external tools like mapping tools that will help growers. So if we can have those integrations in place, again, it minimizes the confusion between stakeholders about where growers are at in the process, and minimize that administrative burden, data entry, extracting and analyzing, etc. The last area that's pretty significant is portal access. So there's a bit of spreadsheets being used in the sector at the moment. And so for our grower groups and for our market to be able to log into the NZGAP system and just see their list of growers would be a very powerful development. And we've just in that pilot phase of it, we've got quite a bit of work to do. But again, we'll increase transparency and reduce the admin for everyone involved. We're also collaborating with HortNZ and product groups on a number of different IT projects. NZGAP wants to connect up, so I think those systems integrations is a big thing. We're all working with the same growers, so we don't want to have growers having to interact with numerous different systems. And so interacting with a smaller number with having data sharing and permission in between those is a more optimal approach. And so it's quite similar to what we've already done for the Food Act. Now, NZGAP has been provided the information, we can provide it onto MPI without the grower having to interact with a different organization and provide very similar information again. And we're also engaging in sector-wide initiatives and IT strategies, not necessarily even just in the sector. Some of these discussions are global. So very much keeping a finger on the pulse of what's happening in the wider space. And lastly, we're developing systems for the Grow and Change project, and again, progress reporting been a big part of that. And so supporting operationally the day-to-day running of the project, but then also the progress reporting. So that's a quick overview of all of our key projects that we've got going on at the moment. I open up the floor for any questions.
There is a question, Damien, on the Q&A from Chris Arbuckle.
So the question is NZGAP HortNZ aware of involved in the farm data platform being developed by regional councils and MFE? And the answer is yes. So that's the INFDP. I'm not going to be able to get the acronym right at the moment, but essentially it's an integrated data platform. And that is trying to get consistency between all the councils, the kind of data that they're collecting, putting it into one consistent format so that it can, first of all, reduce the investment in separate IT systems that's currently going on. If everyone can agree on the requirements and the data standards, well then one approach can help minimize that upfront costs and then maintenance costs. And the other thing is for data sharing. So for things like freshwater farm plans, if there's one consistent approach, and then that enables reporting to be done at a regional level, catchment level, at a national level, because there's consistency of the approach. The challenge from an NZGAP perspective there is that the data requirements are quite prescriptive at a grower level and an audit level, let's say. And then that kind of drives what data needs to be collected from an audit in order to meet those reporting requirements. And the more detailed those reporting requirements become, the more you have a tail wagging the dog scenario. And we say this is not just for freshwater farm plans, we're seeing it in other areas as well. So very much involved in those IT projects and data I suppose in the policy space, looking at what the administrative burden is going to be rather than just what the environmental or food safety outcome that's been sought, because a lot of the time it's the administrative burden which is adding most of the compliance cost. We really want to be focused on outcomes. We're not against data collection and reporting, but trying to make that as sensible as possible so that we're not spending all our time on administration instead of, say, trying to get towards achieving those outcomes. Any other questions?
Doesn't appear to be. So I just want to thank you. Yeah, so I want to thank everyone for attending. And I just really want to wish the team and the organisation all the best for the next 25 years. If it can achieve what it's achieved in the last 25 years, in the next 25 years, it'll be doing very well. So thank you for your attendance. And Damien, is this presentation available if anyone wants to get a hold of it?
Yeah, so the recording and the slides will be put into the newsletter this week and will be available on the website as well before the end of the week.
Very good. And have a good afternoon, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.